Hello, welcome back to my JavaScript tutorial series. Today I'll be covering functions. I'm going to teach you what a function is, how to write a function, and the different types of functions. Without any further ado, let's get started. So for today's tutorial, I already have some startup code. I've already created an HTML page, which we are going to use to study a function today. Just to take you through, we have the file called functions.html. We have an input for the name, which is this part. What is your name? Then enter your name. And we have a submit button that will be used to call this function, the enter name function. We then have a print. We have this part, print your full name in the developer console, which is this part with the button that we shall use to call the print full name function. And then we have this part where we're going to say what list any 5 countries in Africa, which is this part that has a paragraph with an input, then a function that we'll call add country name that we shall call add country name. That will be the function that we shall call, and then we have another paragraph here, list countries, onto which we shall list the countries, in which we shall list the countries. And then we have this other part, which is generate a random number between 0 and 100 and print it to the developer console, which is this part. And lastly, we shall have this one, return a goodbye message, which is this part. Okay, so this is the HTML file that we shall be using. Now, let's get into the JavaScript. So, what are functions? What is a function? So a function is a set of instructions. Set of instructions that we use to perform a given task. So that is basically what a function is. So it is declared. It is declared. Just to capitalize, maybe it is declared using the function keyword. So we use the function keyword to declare what a function is. You say function and then you give the name of the function. And then if we look at the types, we have types of functions. We have the one that uses a function keyword. Uses the function keyword. And then we have what we call an arrow function. An arrow function. I'll show you all what they're like. And then special things to look out for. Functions can have a return or no return. Can have a return stroke output or none. So in this case, we shall look at the look at the return keyword. At the return keyword. Okay, I put this in quotes. And then, yeah, lastly, we shall look at the shorthand. Shorthand of writing an arrow function. An arrow function. Okay, so this is a summary, an overview of what we're going to do in this tutorial. So the first function we're going to look at is a function that we are going to use to enter our full name, submit our full name. So let me call it function keyword. So if we move back into HTML here, we called it enter name. Okay, so function enter name. Then we have brackets, sorry, yeah, yes, brackets. Forgotten the English word for these. These are parentheses. Yes, parentheses, and then we have the brackets here. The parentheses. And so we want to use this function to enter the keyword, to enter the full name. Excuse me, to enter the full name, and then print it on this page. Okay, so we need first of all to get hold of this input. We need to get hold of the value that is going to be used, that we are going to get from this input, what we are going to type in here. And for that, let's put it in a constant value, constant variable, sorry. Const name, name input. And we are going to use the document object that is available on the window object, dot get element by ID. And then the ID that we use in HTML here for this input is, it's going to be name input right here. This is the ID that we used. So we want to get hold of this input here. Okay. We are going to call it name input. All right. So then after getting hold of the name input, we want to get what is in there, what has been typed in. And for that, we shall use a property called value. So here we shall say, we shall put it in a constant, const full name is going to be our name input dot value. That's going to give us the value in that name input. Okay. So after getting the full name now, we want to put this full name in a new element. So we need to create an element that we are going to use to display our full name, right? So in this case here, we need to create a paragraph element that we are going to use to display the full name below this input. So now let's give it a name. Let's give it a name. Const name paragraph. I'll use name paragraph for short form. Is going to be the document dot create element, and then that element is going to be a paragraph element P, which is represented by P. Then after getting that paragraph element, we want to add HTML to it, which is going to be our full name. We shall say name para dot in our HTML, and then we shall pass in our full name as in HTML. So after passing in the full name as in HTML, we now want to add this paragraph into the document, right? We want to print it down here, so we need to append it to its parent element, which is going to be this paragraph, this parent element that has these two inputs, the paragraph that has these two inputs. Okay, so then we need to first get hold of the parent paragraph. So let's call it const parent paragraph, call it parent paragraph for short form. It's going to be document dot get element by ID. Then we shall pass in the ID, which is going to be enter name. Okay, it's going to be our enter name. So we're getting hold of this parent paragraph in here. Okay, so after getting hold of it, we now need to append our name paragraph, the one that is going to be containing our name, just below these two inputs. And to do that, we shall write parent paragraph dot append child. We need to append a child element. Okay, append child, and then we shall pass in our name para, which has the name input. After that, that will display the name below it. After that, you want to clear it. When the page reloads, we want to clear it. And for that, we shall say name para sorry, want to clear our name input after the page reloads. Want to clear the input, remove the name that we've just entered in case someone is visiting the site again. So say name input dot value, and then we shall pass an empty string to it. Okay, so we've written our first function. Just to summarize, a function can be written using the function keyword, which is what declares a function, and then the name of the function. And then we have parentheses, which can have parameters or what they call arguments or not. And then we have the code block. So the code block is where we write our set of instructions that we want this function to execute. Okay, so now let's test the function. So enter your full name. I'll enter my full name, Samtwa Hirgo, and then I'll submit. When I submit, okay, let me see the console. Enter name is not found. Okay. Function enter name is not found. All right, this is supposed to be capital N. So I'll submit. I'll write it again one more time, and then submit. And yes, my name is printed under the input, right? And if I reload, I expect it to clear. It passes in this empty string, and so it clears. And maybe if I put it in someone else's name, let me say Paul Kagame. Submit. See, the name will be Paul Kagame. If I entered in another name, maybe Felix, maybe. Let me say, I don't know if I'm going to write it right. Shisekedi. I'm not sure if I wrote it the right way. But yes, Shisekedi. It is a Congolese name. I'm not good with them. All right, so let me clear this. Now let's move on to the next part. In the next part, we are saying the instructions say print your full name in the developer console. Print your full name in the developer console. So we need to write a function that is going to print my full name in the developer console. And if I move back here into the HTML, I have a function called print your full name, and I pass in two arguments, my first name and my last name, Sam Kwahirwa. So now let's move to the JavaScript. So function print full name is going to take in my first name, arguments of my first name and last name. It can be called arguments or parameters. And what is it going to do? I'm going to get my full name. Let me put it in a const full name. Yes. And I'm going to write my first name, and then concatenate an empty string with a space, and then concatenate my last name. So plus means join. It's called concatenation. And when I put this empty string here with a space, I want to space the two names. That's what that means. Okay, so after getting my full name, I want to print to the console. Console.log full name. Sorry for the noise in the background. In the country where I am today, it's Independence Day. It is 4th of July, and so you probably hear many fireworks in the video. So it's celebration mode right here. Okay. So if I come here and I press print full name and I move to the console, I expect to see the full name here. Okay. Yeah. So print full name comes to the console. I'm calling this function and I'm passing in my first name and the last name. And when I press the button, it executes this function, or it invokes it, and then we can see it right here in the console. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part. where we have this function that is going to list at least 5 countries in Africa. Name at least 5 countries in Africa. We're going to call this function add country name. That's what we called it here in the HTML. Function add country name. So we are going to, we can actually get this code here just to save time, and then let's edit it. Let's edit it. You know, one of the skills that a good developer should have is writing code in the shortest form, and then also being able to actually save time by getting code that you already wrote and just modify it. Okay, so here we're going to say, let me call this country name input. Country name input, and then what's the name of the ID? It's going to be country name. That's the ID we are using here for this input. It's going to be country name. Okay. It's going to be country name. Just to confirm. Country name. And then we're going to say, now let's say country name. It will be country name input dot value. Country name input dot value. Then here we're going to say country name para. Okay, here we're going to create the list input. We're going to use a list to input the countries. So we shall say country name list element, maybe. Yes. And then we shall create a list element, li. And then we need to pass in, so just to put a space so that I make it clear here. So then I need to get to pass in, we need to pass in our country name to the list element, right? So we shall have our country name list, country list element. We shall going to add in HTML, and then we shall pass in the country name. Country name. After passing in the country name, we now need to get hold of this paragraph that we created in here, where we're going to append our list element. So here I'm going to say const. So I think I can actually delete these. Say country name paragraph is going to be document get element by ID, and then pass in the ID, which here we called list of countries. I'll just copy here and paste it. List of countries. And then in this country para, I want to append country name para. I want to append a child, which is going to be the country name list element. And after that, we want to clear the input element. Country name input dot value. Want to pass an empty string to that just to clear the input element. Okay. So now let's test our function. I'm going to pass in the first country as Uganda. Let me enter that. Set ports Uganda here. then put the list country as DRC, and then Rwanda, and then Kenya, so 4, and then Tanzania. Okay, so we enter the country and then add it to the list. Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo, that's the DRC, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania. Okay, so this function, we passed in a set of instructions that we've used to print the country names onto our web page. So let's look at another function maybe. Let's look at a different way of writing a function. That is an arrow function. So with an arrow function, we're going to use it to perform this. Generate a random number between 0 and 100 and print it in the developer console. Okay? Generate a random number between 0 and 100 and print it in the developer console. We're going to use an arrow function. So the difference between a function that uses the function keyword, and an arrow function is that we use the const keyword or the constant to declare the name of the function. Okay, so in this case I'll say const, and then the name of the function will be generate a random number. That's the function that we added to HTML here. Generate a random number, and then after the const we shall use equal sign as though we are assigning a value to the variable. But after the equal sign we shall then put the parentheses. After putting the parentheses, we will then put an arrow, an equals sign and a forward arrow. Equal sign and arrow, less than sign. Yes, a less than sign. That makes an arrow. First write an equal and then a less than sign, and then we shall open up the code block using curly braces. So generate a random number. So const random number, I'll call it random num. So for this we're going to use a special object in JavaScript called the math object. I'll just briefly introduce it. Later on in the series I'll have a more detailed tutorial that I'll dedicate to special objects, so I'll cover it in more detail. But it's called a math object, and we say math.random to generate a random number. And what it does, this generates a random number. It generates a random number between 0 and 1 with many decimals, with many decimal places. Okay, so for example, let's print to the console.log. I'll call it my random number. I say the generated random number. Let me just say the random number is, and then I'll print it to the console. So just to show you in the console, if I let's open the developer console. If I press on generate random number, it has generated me a random number 0.00, very many decimal places after this, right? If I press it again, it will generate another one 0.1 and very many decimals. Okay, so if I want a number between 0 and 100, yes, between 0 and 100. Okay, sorry, shouldn't have changed here. If I want a number between 0 and 100, that means I have to multiply my generated random number with 100. So const, I'll call it big number. Big num is going to be my random number, times 100. And for that I can also cancel it to the log so that you see it. Big num big num is. Okay, so generate my random number here, generate number. So you can see the random number is 0.48 and then many decimal places after that. So if I want to make it a big number, I'll multiply it by 100 and that gives me 48. So it will just move the number by 2 decimal places from here to here, and then we shall have the decimals here. So I now want to get rid of these decimal places. I want to make it an integer. Okay, so I want to say cost big int, right? Maybe big integer. Big integer. I'm going to say now my big number. I'm going to say math. The math.flow. That's a method that we use to generate an integer to get rid of the decimal places. So I'll say math.flow big number, big num. Okay, math.flow big num. And then I can print my big number, to my big random number, which is an integer to the console. In this case, as a console.log, the generated random integer is int for short form, is, I'll say big integer. Okay, it's going to be big integer. And if I click here, I see my generated random int is going to be 2. So it's responding to our question that says generate a random number between 0 and 100. Yeah, so here we are getting 2 as the random integer. I think just to make it, because 2 is not a big integer, let me just say int. Let me say big num, let me say, okay, let me leave big num. Let me say call this integer. Just cancel Ctrl D for both to select both, and then I'll just call it integer. Okay, generate integer. In this case, you have 55. If I refresh and generate again, shall have 33. If I refresh, generate again, shall have 46. Okay, so this is an arrow function. This is an arrow function. We have the const keyword to declare the name of the function. Then we have the equals. Then we have the parentheses. And we have the code block, which has a set of instructions that responds to the query that you have here. All right, so now let's move on to the next part, which is going to be return a goodbye message and print it in the developer console. Okay, so this is where we are going to look at the return keyword. The return keyword. Which gives us, really gives us the output. Gives us the function output. Which you can pass into a variable, which you can then pass into a variable. So that's the return keyword that we're going to look at here. And for me to demonstrate the return keyword, I'm going to use 2 functions just to make it clear. I'll call the first function const say goodbye. That's another function. Const say goodbye, and then I will say const by is going to be goodbye. And then I'm going to return this. I'm going to return the message bye. So now I'm going to have another function that I'm going to call. And in that function, I'll take the return value of this function. So I'll call, so this function here in the HTML, we called it print goodbye. So I'm going to call it another function, const print goodbye. It's going to be const print goodbye. I'm going to say const bye message. I'm now going to call this function, say goodbye, and then its return, the return message, which is the goodbye message, is going to be passed into this variable, the bye message variable. Yeah, so the return key value, the return keyword, excuse me, gives us what has been manipulated in that function. We are returning it when we call the function or when we invoke the function. And then after getting the bye message, it's what we want to print to the developer console as the instructions tell us. So yes, if I say console.log, I will say the function says goodbye. That's the bye message that we've come to get from this function. So now let's call the function here. We'll say goodbye. I'll click here, and then we get our message here. The function says, and then the bye message, which we've passed in here. Maybe let me put here a hyphen. Let me try calling it again. The function says goodbye. So this is one way of using the return keyword in a function, where we get hold of it, where we get hold of the manipulations in one function by taking advantage of the return keyword. So we use the return keyword to give us what has been manipulated in this function, then we pass it into a variable, and then we can print it to the console as the function here says. Okay, so this is one way of writing an arrow function. Now there is a shorthand of writing an arrow function. A shorthand of writing an arrow function. And in that shorthand, we really want to use as fewer lines of code as we can, just to make things brief and very succinct. So let me comment this out. Okay, I could as well, if I want to use that for shorthand, first of all, let me copy this, and then let me comment this out. Okay, so I'm commenting it out, and then let me paste it here. So function say goodbye. Since we are only returning a goodbye message, we could as well just delete this part. I can try to delete this open bracket. I can delete this, and then delete this part. And then I can backspace, and I get this. So in this case, we've shortened this function by putting a return message immediately after the arrow. So this arrow in an arrow function can either open a code block. That's if you're going to do very many manipulations, a lot of instructions or manipulations in the function. But if you simply want to return just one thing, let me say one string, in this case, which is a goodbye string, or just a number, or just returning a value of, I mean, 2 times 4, you can just put the arrow here and then you return. You don't have to write the curly braces. That is exactly what I've done here. And say, if I again call this function, print goodbye, we shall get the same value. The function says, say goodbye. So this is the shorthand of writing an arrow function. You write it very simply and very briefly using just one line of code. So in very complicated applications, you will find a mixture of arrow functions and the functions that are named using the function keyword. And for very short manipulations, usually expert coders will just go for an arrow function where they will just do this and then get the return value. And then they can pick it and put it under a variable later on in their code. Yeah, and with that, we come to the end of the tutorial. We've looked at functions, the different ways of writing a function, and we've gone through the different ways that you can use the shorthand or the longer way of writing an arrow function. I'm going to post this content to GitHub, and you'll find the link to the GitHub repo in the description of this video. If you like this content, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.